According to a recent report by Tony Long, the following was said by Edward John Smith, captain of the RMS Titanic. God himself could not sink this ship. Now, Titanic, I'm sure you've heard that before. But if not, it was the name of a very luxurious ship around the 1910s. And it unfortunately hit an iceberg and sank all the way to the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. Today, I'm going to be talking to you about the backstory of the ship, the day of the tragedy, and why it's still relevant over 100 years later. This is the disastrous tragedy of the RMS Titanic. My first point will be talking about the backstory. Now, all the way back in 1909, designer Thomas Andrews teamed up with shipbuilding company Harland and Wolff to construct the RMS Titanic. Its point was to carry passengers from Europe all the way to North America. It was started construction in Belfast, Ireland, and took about 3 years to make. It costed about $7.5 million, and its full name being the Royal Mail Ship RMS Titanic. A lot of the standouts of the ship were in the interior. There was 3 decks, one for first class, one for second class, and one for third class, and it offered lots to do. One of those being a lot of the food to eat. There was about 3 menus for each deck, and it had everything from alcoholic beverages all the way to dessert. On the left, you can see an indoor gym that was offered to the first class, and on the right, you can see a living room lounge where people would relax and do most of their free time. On the left, you can see another lounge area where people could actually eat outside and enjoy the air. On the right, you can see the grand staircase, which was one of the most luxurious parts of the first class area, and it was also the most expensive. We'll now be talking about a size breakdown, and according to analyst for National Geographic, Gabriel Angeli, the Titanic weighed about 46,000 tons. It was 882 feet long and 92 feet wide. It could hold a capacity of about 3,320 passengers. With the construction of the ship, there was a lot of questionable manufacturing decisions made, one of which being the addition of a 4th funnel, which was actually fake. That funnel was used for symmetry and for ventilation in the ship. There was also a lot of words being thrown around, the most being unsinkable. Because of the ship's weight and its size, people thought it could never sink, which resulted in the subtraction of lifeboats, with it being cut by half the amount that it was supposed to have, which would eventually be its biggest mistake. As our second point, we'll be talking about the tragedy that happened. On April 10th, 1912, the Titanic started its maiden voyage from Southampton, England, all the way to New York City, carrying about 2,000 passengers. Here you can see some pictures of just what the Titanic looked like. It was one of the biggest ships of its time, and still one of the biggest to this day. You can see that in the water, and these are very rare photos. On April 14th, 1912, warning signs of icebergs in the area were alerted to the Titanic, and at around 11:40 p.m., an iceberg was spotted and was immediately demanded to be steered away. But unfortunately, it hit the iceberg and it began to fill with water, the first being the hull, and the crew members all began creating an evacuation, and it boarded women and children first into the only half the lifeboats that were supposed to be on. And unfortunately, it was also very late, and there was a lot of icebergs in the area, which means there is very freezing temperature water. On April 15th, 1912, it was about 2 a.m., and the Titanic broke in half and officially sank underwater all the way to the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. Thankfully, a smoke signal from the Titanic was seen by another nearby ship, the RMS Carpathia, which at about 3:30 a.m. arrived at the scene of the sinking and retrieved all of the passengers that were on board lifeboats. In total, about 705 passengers survived, and over 1,500 people lost their lives that day. 61 of them being children. After that tragedy, the news blew up, and it's all you'd be hearing for the next week. With the sinking and of all the lives lost that day, there was a lot of new safety measure acts that were added to all ships in England and the United States. One major change being having enough lifeboats for everybody on board so that no lives can be lost or reduce the amount of lives lost that day. Bringing us to our last point, point 3, relevancy. A century later. We'd hear nothing about the Titanic until about September 1st, 1985, where underwater explorer Robert Ballard took his boat, Alvin, to the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean, about 12,000 meters down, to find the Titanic, which he eventually did. Here you can just see some pictures of what he found on that day. You can see some boilers, the propeller, the steering wheel, some plates, bathtub, and a pair of shoes. Over here you can see a boiler piece of the Titanic, as well as a chandelier from one of the staircases. Ever since that day, a lot of artifacts from the Titanic had been raised up to the surface and be put into museums, which gave them a lot of success. This caught the eye of a lot of people, and it gave a lot of success to other museums. There'd be many spread all across England as well as the United States. A lot of artifacts would be raised, would actually be put into auction and be bought by a lot of people that are interested. Over here you can see actually a huge piece of the Titanic that was raised up and put into a museum. You can also see some lifeboats and some other artifacts from people that are aboard of the Titanic. And on the bottom right, you can actually see some dollar bills retrieved from the early 1900s, which definitely go for a lot of money. The Titanic also saw a lot of success in its media, with the release of the 1997 film Titanic. It was a hit in the box office, and it made lots of money, and it caught the interest of the Titanic to more people, even more. There was also a lot of children's books made about the Titanic, telling the story and be put into a lot of elementary schools for little kids to read. There was also a lot of merchandise sold, things like models, shirts, even video games. It also saw success in documentaries, as well as many conspiracy theories. And the more that we uncovered about the Titanic, the more theories that were laid out. A lot of them being about the Titanic supposedly being swapped with another ship, not actually sinking. A lot of crazy conspiracies formed. As I said before, it saw also a lot of success in video games, with the most popular being virtual reality, where you actually get to somehow experience the tragedy for yourself. And it saw a lot of success in that, as well as many board games where it'd be based on having to escape the tragedy of the Titanic and hopefully surviving in the end. Now, in conclusion, what's next for the Titanic? Well, it's not looking too good. Due to the amount of sea bacteria in the water, it is estimated to be until about 2030 that the ship will remain underwater, until it completely dissolves by bacteria. It is also not likely to raise the ship up to the surface, as it is way too far underground, and the water pressure would just make it explode as it comes up. Is there more to tell about the Titanic? Well, there's still being stories told today, more theories and more documentaries being made on stuff that we didn't know beforehand. This slide shows all of the sources that I used, which being the pictures, my YouTube videos of my information, and a lot of my quotes used. I thank you guys for watching the presentation. It was a lot of fun to make, and I think it came out really well. Hopefully you got something from this, and hopefully you enjoyed it as much as I did. I thank you for watching that.